Let's discuss the implications of this visit. What does this visit really mean for the bilateral ties between the two nations? And to discuss that further, I'm now joined by Pramit Pal Chaudhary, who's the head of South Asia practice at Eurasia Group, and of course Raymond Vickery, the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Trade and Development. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Let's first go to you, Raymond. Let's understand the significance of this historic visit. How does it really look to you, given that the bilateral meeting that happened between the President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, that happened at the President's residence, and then the announcements that were made in areas of technology, green energy, transportation. How significant are these announcements, and will these announcements now herald a new dawn between the two countries?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think it's very significant. You know, when I was Assistant Secretary of Commerce, we opened up the relationship between U.S. and India, not by concentrating on security immediately, but on economic engagement. And that has been a driver in the growth of the relationship between the U.S. and India. The more India has gotten away from the license raj of the past and the use of markets, the use of competition to be able to allocate goods and services, the closer the United States and India have become. It's very significant that Prime Minister Modi would take time at this crucial period to be with President Biden, who will go out of office next year, and reiterate the relationship between the United States and India on economic matters. The semiconductor fabrication plant is very significant. The announcements in joint R&D, and let's not forget manufacturing generally. Right. In that joint statement, there is a statement about auto parts.
Right. And Raymond, we'll come to discuss that in just a bit. We'll come to discuss all of those matters in just a bit. But let me also now go to Pramit. Pramit, thank you very much for patiently waiting it out. I want to understand from you, how this visit looks to you, given that the defense minister was in the United States just a few weeks back. Then the U.S. NSA was in India right after the Prime Minister got sworn in as Prime Minister for the third time. How do you really see the political dynamics of this visit in light of, the election that's coming up, and what's the key message that's going out?
One, I think it's a message of continuity, that India does not expect the policies, the relationship to change, no matter who wins the election in November in America. So it does not have any problems in continuing to invest in the Biden administration, even though Biden is obviously a lame duck president. They assume that whatever happens with him will be continued in the next U.S. government. In fact, I would say India is probably one of the few countries or major countries in the world that is not overly concerned whether or not it's Harris or Trump becoming the next president. It also, I think, is partly about Modi's personal relationship with Biden. They've had an extraordinarily good relationship, despite having never really interacted until Biden was elected. And it's very, and I've heard that Biden has privately told his aides that he thinks among all the Asian leaders he's met, he finds Modi's vision and intelligence among the best and the highest that he's ever experienced.
Yes, Pramit, and in fact, that point that you made about Mr. Biden's personal relationship with the Prime Minister, that being very significant to this overall bilateral relationship as well. If you remember, after President Trump actually moved out of the White House, there were concerns on how this relationship is going to pan out and how will it really shape up. But, it's panned out rather well. Let me come to you on that point, Mr. Raymond. You were speaking about semiconductors. Of course, several big announcements have been made so far as setting up a new fab in the defense sector is concerned. There is a view on security, with respect to the establishment of that fab. Then there is another 10 million research grant as well. The Prime Minister also met with semiconductor companies, at least 3 of them today. How significant are these announcements in boosting capabilities of India, transfer of technology, and becoming a part of the overall global supply chain network?
Well, I think they're very significant. You may recall that about a year ago, Secretary of Commerce, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Raimondo was in India to talk about semiconductors and talk about our various programs for promoting semiconductor fabrication, both in the United States and India. And that trip was designed to make sure that there was cooperation rather than competition. And I think that the announcement indicates that those talks have borne fruit, that rather than being in head-to-head competition in terms of manufacture, that there is a broader view of shifting supply chains from places where there are adversaries like China to India, so that there will be friend sourcing in regard to the U.S. and India. So I think that it's very important. I do want to say that I think it's important to recognize the bipartisan support in the United States for this kind of activity. But on climate change, particularly, there's a vast difference between the two candidates for president. And the United States and India have in train right now a lot of climate change activities. And those would be thrown into doubt, I believe, if you have a president who
Right.
denies really climate
Right,
change
Mr.
reality.
Vickery. Right. Right. Right, and we do hope that there could be some movement on that, although both the countries are, of course, collaborating so far as green technology is concerned. On your point about semiconductors, of course, you were mentioning about Ms. Raimondo coming last year into the country, but just a couple of weeks back, the U.S. State Department also forged a partnership with India under its CHIPS Act. On that point, Mr. Pramit, help me understand how significant are these announcements, especially from a countering China perspective is concerned, given that China has a stranglehold on supply chains. How significant are these partnerships are going to be, because during the pandemic, we did see some disruption of supply chains. So here that point about not about securing supply chains is concerned. And are these announcements really in line with how the United States looks at India as a counterweight to China?
Well, I think as Mr. Vickery said, friendshoring is now a key part of U.S. strategy. And if you look at the Quad Summit, the bilateral meeting, and as you mentioned, earlier meetings by Indian and U.S. officials over the past few months, I would say very clearly in at least three supply chain areas: semiconductors, green technology, which means electrolyzers, solar modules, batteries, and so on, storage units, energy storage units, as well as now pharmaceuticals. And you'll notice that in the bilateral and the Quad summit, there was discussion about creating safe and secure supplies for pharmaceutical products, precursor chemicals. And I believe one of the key points of this is, for example, opioid production and fentanyl production in a manner that is safe and secure rather than leaky, as is happening out of China and causing problems in the United States. So on these three already, and there are
Right.
other supply chains that were mentioned, it's very clear that they're trying to set up a safe and secure system that, as you said, at least reduces dependency on China. And keep in mind that it's not just what's happening
Right,
between
right,
us and the United
right.
States. There are 19 Taiwanese companies now, for example, that have come here to make components and so on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In Taiwan, given that it is a large player so far as the semiconductor ecosystem is concerned, I'll come to you in just a bit, Mr. Raymond. But let me continue with Pramit. Pramit, while relations between the two nations remain steadfast, however, given the context of former President Trump actually calling India as a trade abuser, and United States, as you'd know, is one of the largest export markets so far as India is concerned, there is some cause of concern in case of a Trump presidency. Is there a cause, I want to ask you? And is it time now that India becomes more vocal about tariff cuts, because US is becoming increasingly more protectionist?
With the Democrats, we always have a problem on human rights issues. And with Republicans, at least under the Trump administration, we have problems on tariffs and trade. So there's always one or two points of disagreement or points of irritation between in either type of administration. That's not a big surprise. There's no bilateral relationship between any two countries in the world. Those doesn't have points of friction. Yes, we will see what happens with Trump. And Trump has, India has generally fairly high protection, high tariffs. And so therefore Trump has argued, as of other people, that India basically protects its market while getting access to other markets. Trump is particularly obsessed with tariffs, and has a personal concern about this. Trade overall has moved in other directions. Tariffs are far less important now than they were before. It's non-tariff barriers, such as standards. And now increasingly we're seeing a lot of trade interest in the digital side. What are your standards on cross-border data flow? What are your
Yes.
policies regarding data storage and data privacy? Those are actually much more important now in global trade. So the game, I think, with Trump has always been give him something on the tariffs so that the rest of his administration can focus on these other much more important, if you wish, 21st century trade issues. But ultimately, remember
Yes. Yes.
when he was
Right.
president, he did impose tariffs on us, and we imposed
He
retaliatory
did.
tariffs, but they did not
Retaliated,
fundamentally
and we
change
did
the economic
retaliate on
direction.
those tariffs, Prabhat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it did not
And they
really
were
change,
lifted
but we'll
later
have to
on.
see how that goes, because Trump has also spoken about de-dollarization and then imposing tariffs, because he, of course, wants to batter for the US dollar. Raymond, let me come to you on, Quad, and of course, we were discussing it just earlier into the discussion. It was formed as a bulwark against Chinese expansionism, more as a military alliance. So how do you really see Quad shaping up now in light of that meeting that happened yesterday? And more importantly, how do you see India's role in the Quad? Is it time for Quad to perhaps now expand and become more of a trade bloc in the region?
Well, I think that if you look at this joint statement, the so-called Wilmington Declaration that came out of the Quad, you will be amazed by the
Right.
breadth of the statements and the breadth of cooperation between the four countries which are there. It doesn't just stop at economic matters. It is broad-ranging in regard to security, in regard to climate change, in regard to what happens with a so-called cancer moonshot, and the cooperation on critical materials. It is an extremely comprehensive document. So yes, I would say that what is happening with the Quad is it is going from something which was designed really to coordinate response to natural disasters between Japan, Australia, the United States, and India, to a more comprehensive approach to providing peace and prosperity throughout the Indo-Pacific area. And it's significant that it's called the Indo-Pacific area now. And without India, there just is no Indo-Pacific. And I think that these other great democracies, Japan, Australia, recognize that along with India and the U.S. And so I think it's going to be significant in building not only prosperity, but peace throughout the region. And it is very much a step forward.
Definitely. And, India is now holding that Quad summit next year. Of course, the Prime Minister's message loud and clear that the Quad is here to stay. Pramit, let me come to you. India's message overall has been, when it comes to issues of war or geopolitical conflicts, that issues of the 21st century cannot really be resolved on war front, cannot be resolved by war. Whether it was, during the Prime Minister's meeting with President Zelensky or even President Putin. So ahead of tonight's address at the UNSC, how significant is this address going to be in positioning India as a global power? And how do you really see that peace plan now going forward, especially as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned?
So since he's come to being elected for a third time, Modi has emphasized that India will be Vishwa Bandhu for the rest of the world. In other words, universal friend. And another expression used is Vishwamitra, also the same thing. So it's very clear that the position of the government right now on foreign policy is India is not picking a fight with anybody. India will attempt to, if you wish, ease tensions, even with countries that it has rivalries with. So you can see, for example, recently, you've seen a number of meetings between Indian and Chinese foreign ministers attempting to ease tensions that have flared up over the past 4 years. And even with Pakistan, we may see Modi make his first state visit, if you wish, at the SCO summit. And so on. So I think we're seeing a very clear Indian position that we, at this present point of international instability, India does not feel it makes sense to add to that. And in fact, India will go out of its way to do otherwise. So I think we'll see some elements of that in his speech. Now, we do not have a peace plan in the Ukraine-Russia thing, and in fact, that does not diplomatically make sense. This is what you can only do is be a bridge of communication between the two sides. Any peace plan will come out of your conversations with both countries. There is no evidence that right now the two countries involved, Ukraine or Russia, are really interested in a peace plan. But what we do know is Modi has said that if anybody, both sides ask, he's prepared to play that role as a mediator.
Right. Absolutely. And India has been very key so far as, speaking to all the sides concerned is concerned. On that note, thank you very much, Pramit, and thank you very much, Raymond, for joining us this evening on ET Now and discussing that very, very crucial and a rather historic visit by the Prime Minister to the United States. All eyes now on the Prime Minister's address tonight at the United Nations.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.